A birthday forgotten by the world, but a dog senses pain that no one else can see. On a frozen February afternoon, a veteran officer with a broken heart discovers a birthday so silent it hurts to witness. Just two children, a stub of bread, and a loyal German shepherd who senses pain no one else can touch. In a town that forgot how to notice suffering, one quiet act of kindness begins a chain of healing neither man nor dog could have predicted. Stay with this story. It will challenge your idea of strength and reveal the true power of simply showing up again and again. February settled over North Hollow like an old quilt, heavy and worn, tucking the little town beneath layers of silence and snow. Pine branches hung low over the narrow road, their needles stiff with frost, and the sky held the pale blue of faded denim stretched thin by cold. The kind of cold that lingers in your bones long after you come inside and makes the air taste like iron. Officer Warren Hale drove alone through that stillness, the wipers beating a tired rhythm against the windshield, pushing aside flakes that melted, then froze again, in thin spiderwebs of ice. In the passenger seat, Murphy, his German shepherd, slept with his muzzle tucked into his paws, chest rising and falling slow as the old clock on the courthouse wall. Now and then, one ear flicked, catching the low hum of the heater or the rustle of Warren's winter jacket as he shifted in the seat. There was little reason to rush. The radio was quiet, nothing but static and the echo of distant news, far from here where not much happened, and no one expected it to. North Hollow was that kind of place, where nothing changed until one day everything did. Warren's eyes, gray and sharp, took in the world like a man checking fences. The bare trees, the lines of snow pressed flat by the wind, the porch lights already burning yellow against the blue hour. He reached for the heat dial, felt the ache in his knuckles, a tight, familiar pain, made worse by years of winter and the habit of holding on too hard, too long. He'd told himself, as he did most mornings, that today would be just another shift, another set of hours strung between duty and the empty house waiting at the end. He carried that thought the way he carried everything, inside, pressed flat, showing nothing on the outside. That was the way of men who'd lost too much and learned not to talk about it. It was what made him steady. It was what made him last. But on the dash, tucked beneath the worn edge of his patrol log, was a scrap of green paper, a reminder he'd written days before and almost forgotten. Remember, someone's birthday today. The words felt strange now, like something from another life. He could not say for sure whose birthday he meant. Maybe his son's, gone these 12 years. Maybe his own, which he rarely marked. Or maybe, he thought, it was just a way to hold on to something gentle, something that wasn't duty. The truck's tires found the gravel stretch where the woods pressed close, and Warren slowed, eyes narrowing, as he watched an old man with a red scarf shuffle along the shoulder. The man lifted a hand, slow, and Warren nodded, not smiling but not unfriendly either. He drove on, and the old man's figure shrank to a smudge in the rearview mirror. Murphy stirred. The dog's breath fogged the glass, and he shifted his weight, letting his tail thump once against the seat. Warren reached over, knuckles brushing the fur behind Murphy's ear, and the dog leaned into the touch without opening his eyes. A green pine bough, brittle with ice, swept across the windshield as Warren rounded the next corner. He let the wipers pause, watching the world blur and sharpen through the frost. There was a hush to the day, an undercurrent of waiting, like the world was holding its breath for something neither good nor bad, just inevitable. His mind drifted to his son, who would have been 20 now, to the memory of his wife, her laughter echoing in a kitchen light years away. to the feeling every year of the calendar circling back and him pretending not to notice. It was easier to be strong, to be needed, than to admit the loneliness of the long drive home. The road narrowed, passing between snowdrifts high as fence rails. Warren glanced at his watch, a battered thing, hands frozen at 2:17, the battery long dead. He never changed it. That was the hour his son was born, the time he marked every year with a private ritual, a pause, a breath, a nod to the memory. He pressed on, tires crunching over the hardpack. Murphy yawned, rolling onto his side, one hind leg stretched out. The part of his tail that was missing looked almost natural now, a tuft of black fur ending in a blunt, healed scar. Warren sometimes wondered if the dog missed that lost piece, or if he'd simply learned to move differently, to carry the loss with the same quiet that Warren did. They reached the edge of the village just as the sun fell behind the trees, draining the color from the sky. Houses blurred past, smoke rising in lazy spirals from stone chimneys, the windows glowing gold. Warren slowed at an intersection, watched a mother herd two children across the street, her hand tight on their sleeves. One of the kids turned to look at the cruiser, eyes wide and curious, then hurried on. At the far end of Main Street, Warren stopped the car. He killed the engine, sat for a moment in the hush. Murphy was awake now, alert but still, a soft, warm presence that filled the space better than words. Warren took out his small notebook, the one he carried everywhere, and wrote, February 12th. Sky the color of old snow. Noticed a man walking alone. Wonder what he remembers. He closed the notebook, slipped it into his coat. He was strong, or tried to be. He was the one people called when things fell apart. That was his job, his role, his armor. But sometimes, like now, it felt thin. He reached to open the door. Murphy nosed his hand, gentle, steady, his brown eyes searching Warren's face as if to say, I know. Warren swallowed. The hardness in his chest wavered. Something behind his ribs aching in a way he refused to name. For a long moment, the two sat there, man and dog, caught in the fading light. Then, with the world wrapped in silence, Warren finally let himself exhale, a breath that shook, that carried the weight of too many years spent pretending. And Murphy, ever patient, pressed his head into Warren's palm, anchoring him to this place, this day, this quiet truth that even the strong sometimes break. Outside, dusk thickened over North Hollow. Inside the cruiser, for the first time in a long while, Warren allowed the edges of his strength to blur, just a little, in the company of the only soul who never asked him to be anything but himself. The following morning settled over North Hollow with a dull, pewter haze. Snow had fallen through the night, laying fresh silence on every rooftop, every yard, every pine branch reaching out over the narrow county roads. Officer Warren Hale drove slow, the engine of his cruiser humming steady beneath him, each mile carrying him further from the small warmth of home and deeper into the hush that came after a storm. He checked the radio only once. Dispatch crackled, a burst of static, a voice too young for winter, asking for a unit to check a report from the edge of town. Children, maybe, seen near the old Larrabee warehouse, out past the grain elevator and the frozen creek. No one called in any names. No one sounded alarmed. In a town like North Hollow, things rarely rose to the level of panic. Still, Warren felt something nudge him, a prickle low in his chest, as if a thread had come loose inside his ribcage. Murphy sat up as soon as the cruiser's wheels rolled onto the open road. The old dog's movement was careful, dignified, as if he was taking account of the world with each new day. His ears turned at every sound, wind ruffling a plastic tarp, a distant knock of wood against metal. His eyes followed Warren's hands as they moved across the steering wheel, the two of them bound together by habit and 100 silent understandings. They passed the edge of the village, where telephone poles leaned slightly, and the only footprints in the snow belonged to cats, or the few children brave enough to walk to school on foot. Warren slowed to let a battered blue truck pull out from a driveway. The driver waved. Warren nodded. The gesture returned, neither needing words to fill the quiet. As the cruiser wound past the old mill pond, Warren glanced at the dashboard, where the note from yesterday remained. "Remember, someone's birthday today." He left it there, letting his mind drift back, not to celebration, but to the brittle ache that came from absence. The birthdays missed, the voices grown faint. Murphy whined softly in the back seat, shifting as the car took a curve. His tail swept once, then stilled. Warren watched him in the mirror, noticing the dog's gaze fixed on something beyond the window, his posture sharpening, a kind of animal alertness that never failed to make Warren pause. He parked beside the shell of the Larrabee warehouse, the old brick building standing gaunt and hollow against the snow, paint peeled in sheets from the metal doors, and an iron hook dangled useless above a splintered loading dock. There were no tire tracks, only faint marks in the snow that trailed off toward the edge of the woods, a set of small boot prints, staggered and uneven. Warren's hand found his badge out of habit, though he left it clipped beneath his coat, unseen but present. He stepped out, boots sinking a little in the fresh powder. Murphy jumped down after him, careful with his hind leg, and shook himself, the motion sending a halo of frost from his back. The air was different here, sharper, tinged with the scent of wet earth and old oil. Somewhere nearby, a crow called once and fell silent. Warren scanned the lot. At first he saw nothing but the familiar detritus of a rural winter. Shards of ice along the gutters, a soda can half buried beside a snowdrift, wind-blown wrappers caught against the fence. Then he noticed the swing in the chain-link gate, the way it hung just slightly ajar. The boot prints led inside, and the snow on the threshold was brushed flat, as if someone had swept it hurriedly with the side of a shoe. He hesitated. Years of patrol work had taught him that most stories started not with shouting, but with small, out-of-place things. A footprint, a broken branch, a door left open against the cold. He called for Murphy, not with words, but a soft whistle. The dog's head lifted, and he trotted ahead, nose low, body taut but unafraid. Warren followed, the warehouse swallowing them into its shadow. Inside, the light was thin, leaking through broken panes high above. Dust hung in the air. Murphy's claws clicked softly against the worn concrete, then stopped. The dog stood still, staring at a corner where the darkness pooled deepest. Warren's heart beat slow, steady, but he felt something shift in him, a memory of years ago, when his son was still small, and the world's dangers seemed to wait just outside the door. That day, too, the air had felt heavy, the silence thick, and he'd told himself, as he did now, to be strong, to not let fear slip through the seams. He stepped closer. On the floor near the wall, a child's glove, blue with white stripes, lay abandoned, a tiny patch of color against the gray. Warren crouched, picked it up, brushing away the ice crystals. He saw a name written inside in faded ink, Mateo. Behind him, Murphy gave a low, uncertain whine. The dog's gaze was fixed on the far side of the warehouse, where faint, newer footprints led away. Warren pressed the glove into his pocket, his breath visible in the cold air. He let his hand rest on Murphy's head for a moment, steadying the dog, steadying himself. He remembered his son, how the boy would try to be brave, never letting Warren see when he was scared or sick. The memory cut through him, sharp and sudden. He closed his eyes just a second, then opened them again, looking for what he knew must come next. Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent as breath. Murphy nudged his shoulder gently, a warm weight, a question and a comfort at once. Warren exhaled. The mask of hardness slipped a little. For a moment he allowed himself to feel the worry, the tiredness, the ache that came from being the one who never broke. Murphy saw it all. His pain, his holding on. The dog's eyes, wise and sad, met his, holding the truth neither of them needed to say. There was work to be done. But first, Warren simply let his hand rest in Murphy's fur, letting the quiet settle between them, gathering himself before moving on into whatever waited in the winter cold. Warren and Murphy moved through the warehouse's brittle half-light, every step stirring echoes from the cracked concrete floor. The silence inside was immense, a silence that held secrets, edged with the faintest sound of wind pushing against the boards and a draft seeping under the battered door. Each breath Warren took was visible in the cold, trailing like a small, hesitant cloud behind him. Murphy kept close, his presence more anchor than companion, his movements so measured that Warren sometimes forgot he was there until he looked down and saw a pair of brown eyes glinting up through the dusk. A stray shaft of sunlight cut through a broken window, falling across a table pushed against the wall. On that table, small things had been arranged with the care of someone trying to make do. A single slice of bread, thin and brittle, lying on a saucer, 2 paper cups set side by side, empty except for a ring of melted snow, a candle, pink and stubby, pressed into the bread and already burned down to a stub, wax pooling at its base. The flame shivered, barely holding, fighting against the drafts. 2 children sat on battered chairs beside the table. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, with dark hair braided tight and cheeks smudged with dirt and cold. Her little brother, no more than 5, hunched beside her, his knees drawn up under his coat, which was too big, sleeves dangling past his small hands. They didn't move as Warren and Murphy approached, as if their stillness could make them invisible. The girl stared at the candle. Her lips moved, silent, the barest shape of a wish slipping through. The boy, thin shoulders trembling, kept his face turned toward the warmth of his sister's body, eyes half-lidded, jaw clenched in a line of practiced resolve. In the wavering light, they looked like they might vanish at any moment, figures caught between hope and the certainty of being forgotten. Murphy broke the distance first. Without a sound, he padded to the boy's side, tail low, posture soft. He didn't sniff, didn't demand. Instead, he settled at the child's feet and, after a pause, leaned gently against the boy's legs. The boy startled just a little, but did not shrink away. Instead, a hand found its way to Murphy's neck, tentative and cold. The dog stayed utterly still, letting himself be touched, as if offering his quiet strength for the taking. Warren wanted to speak, to ask questions, to fix what was so obviously broken. His hand hovered at his side, then curled into a fist. He remembered every time he'd tried to fill silence with words and failed. The air was thick with things better left unspoken. Shame, need, the fragile dignity of children pretending to be brave. So he sat, lowering himself onto a crate across from the table, boots scuffing the floor. His knees ached as he settled in, The pain a dull echo of years spent kneeling beside bedsides, graves, playgrounds, abandoned for reasons no one liked to say out loud. The candle flickered, making the shadows move. The girl blinked hard, eyes shining in the light. Her brother drew a shuddering breath, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to tip toward collapse. But then Murphy pressed his head firmly into the boy's lap, a warm, silent reassurance, and the boy's shoulders dropped, just a fraction. The girl glanced at Warren, then quickly away, clutching her own hands, as if afraid they might betray her. No one spoke. The only sounds were the wind rattling the high windows and the faint ticking of Warren's watch. Hands stopped at 2:17, but still counting time in memory. His gaze wandered across the scene, the candle stub, the bread, the cups, the way the girl's shoe tapped out a nervous rhythm beneath the table, the boy's other hand, tucked under his coat, holding something, a ribbon, a stone, close to his chest. It was a birthday party of sorts, a birthday in exile, celebrated not with cake or laughter, but with what was left after hope and luck had both run out. Warren let the fact settle in his chest, heavy but familiar. He knew birthdays that felt like this, more marking of survival than celebration, a quiet promise to endure another year. He felt a sting behind his eyes, a tightness in his throat he refused to give voice to. Instead, he did what he could, opened a pocket, found an old, wrapped caramel he'd kept for the long night shifts. He placed it gently on the table, careful not to break the silence. The girl's eyes widened for a moment, then flickered down again, her cheeks flushing beneath the grime. Murphy shifted, tail brushing the boy's ankle, as if reminding him that he was not as alone as he felt. The dog's presence seemed to fill the cold room with something warmer than the candle's small light. Warren watched the scene, heart hammering in a way he hadn't let himself feel in years. The ache of not being able to fix things. The slow realization that sometimes staying is the only gift you can give. He wanted to reach out, to take the children home right there, but understood the world was rarely that simple. So he sat, silent, letting the moment stretch. The girl's breathing slowed. The boy blinked, finally, as if shaking off a layer of fear. For a long while, no one moved. Outside, snow swirled against the glass, the world closing in, soft and blank. Inside, a little flame continued its brave, trembling dance, and Warren, strong for so long, felt something in himself begin to soften. Thaw. In the face of this makeshift birthday, all his practiced strength felt false. What mattered now was presence. A man, a dog, 2 children, and the stubborn, tiny light refusing to go out. The light in the warehouse dimmed further as afternoon pressed into evening, making the single pink candle seem even smaller, more vulnerable. The air was thick with cold, and with a hush that asked for reverence. Warren sat motionless, shoulders hunched against the chill, as if trying to shield the children with nothing but his presence. Murphy, ever attuned to small shifts in the room, moved a fraction closer to the boy, offering not warmth, but something steadier. Safety. The girl's eyes, dark and wide, flicked between the stub of bread and the man on the crate, her gaze skimming the surface of things, never settling long enough for questions. Her small hand trembled as she adjusted the candle, steadying the flame as if by willpower alone. It was the details that told Warren everything. The boy's coat, an adult's, sleeves rolled and safety pinned, its hem stained and dragging in the dust. The girl's shoes, canvas sneakers too thin for February, soles patched with layers of duct tape. Beneath her left sleeve, Warren caught sight of a faded hospital bracelet. Just a glimpse before she tugged the fabric down. Her brother, face pinched and eyes shining with unshed tears, wiped his nose with the back of his hand, then tucked it quickly beneath the table, ashamed. Warren's chest tightened. He remembered the feeling of holding it together for someone else, the long, silent years after his wife passed, when every day was a performance for his son's sake, pretending the world could still be safe. He saw that same weariness, that thin bravado, in the way the girl held herself upright, never leaning too much into comfort, not even into her brother. Outside, a gust rattled the glass. Inside, time slowed. The world was reduced to breathing and waiting. Murphy's ears twitched. He reached up with his nose and nudged the boy's hand, drawing it away from where he'd been picking at a raw scratch on his wrist. The boy looked startled, then managed a thin smile, a child's smile, tight and fleeting, but real. Warren let the silence grow. He watched how the girl glanced over at the dog, eyes lingering on Murphy's missing tail, the odd curve of scar tissue where the fur ended abruptly. She seemed to recognize something in the dog's posture, the learned way of carrying loss, of adapting to what could not be undone. Slowly, as the candle guttered and wax spilled onto the bread, Warren pieced things together, not through words, but through absence. The way the girl flinched when the wind slammed the metal door. The way the boy curled protectively around his knees, shrinking himself small. He remembered what the dispatcher had said. No names given, no one missing reported. Just children seen wandering, maybe lost. He thought of the new families in town. Migrant workers called in for the apple orchards and the cannery. Families who came and went with the harvest. He'd seen a woman at the market the week before, her arms full of groceries, her face lined with exhaustion, a badge pinned to her coat from a cleaning service across the county line. She'd moved quickly, head down. He remembered now, a little girl trailing behind her, holding her brother's hand. A memory surfaced, sharp and unbidden. His own son's hand, small in his palm, the way the boy would squeeze tight when uncertain, but never ask for help out loud. Warren swallowed against the lump rising in his throat. His strength, he'd believed, had always been for his family, but sometimes it had turned into silence, a wall too high for his son to scale. The girl was tracing circles in the frost on the tabletop, her finger following an invisible pattern. The boy had grown still, lulled by Murphy's steady presence, his eyes half closed, his breath slow. Warren caught a whisper of words as the girl bent closer to her brother. No more than a breath, but it sounded like almost over. He watched as the girl adjusted her brother's coat, her movements practiced, habitual. Her fingers lingered for a heartbeat at the hem of his sleeve, checking for holes, then tucking it around his wrist. She glanced at Warren, and for the first time let him see the fear and fatigue swirling just beneath her quiet. He nodded, a gesture meant to say, "You don't have to carry it alone." She looked away, blinking fast. Murphy shifted, placing himself so both children could lean against his side if they wanted. He licked at a raw scratch on the boy's hand, then rested his head across the girl's feet. The warmth of his body, the slow, steady thump of his heart, seemed to pull the children closer, easing their rigid posture. Warren didn't press, he didn't ask for details. He'd learned, sometimes painfully, that the truth came out only in its own time, through the language of tired shoulders and guarded glances. The story was here, in this makeshift birthday, in the echo of parents working too many hours, in the dignity of a girl holding the line for her brother. Minutes passed. The candle finally sputtered out. The girl straightened, blinking at the darkness, then pulled her brother up by the hand. They stood unsteady. Warren rose too, his knees creaking, pain radiating up his legs. He wanted to scoop them up, to promise everything would be different. Instead, he simply stood by, ready to walk with them out of the cold. Murphy waited, tail sweeping the dusty floor, as the girl placed her hand, at last, on his head. Her touch was light but lingering, as if she trusted the dog with a secret no one else could carry. In the waning light, Warren felt the full weight of their story settle into him, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. He would not let their silence go unheard. He would hold space for the pain they carried, just as Murphy had. He would stand with them, quietly, until it was time to go home. Outside, the snow kept falling, quiet as hope. And inside, for a moment, no one pretended to be anything but tired and in need of a little kindness. The warehouse felt even colder now that the candle had gone out. For a long moment, nobody moved. Warren let the quiet stretch, holding it gently, as if afraid any sudden sound might shatter what little courage the children had left. He had no grand solutions in his pocket, no rescue lined up at the door, only the simple fact of being there, and Murphy's unwavering calm. He stood up slowly, knees popping. Murphy did too, giving himself a slow, deliberate shake, fur bristling in the gloom. The boy, Mateo, clung to his sister's hand, and she braced herself straight-backed, swallowing any trace of need. Warren remembered the ache of pretending, of being the anchor when the world seemed to be slipping away. That old instinct rose in him now, but softer, an urge not to save, but simply to stay. He reached into the deep pockets of his coat and found what he was searching for. A battered, foil-wrapped chocolate bar, half broken, the kind he bought in bulk for late patrols or lonely fishing trips. He unwrapped it, broke it carefully in half, and placed the pieces on the rickety table. No speech, no "here, take this," just an offering, as quiet and natural as a sigh. The children stared at the chocolate, uncertain. The boy looked to his sister, and she gave him the barest nod. Only then did he reach, hands shaking, to take a piece. He bit into it, eyes going wide at the sweet, unexpected richness. His sister took her own piece more slowly, almost reverently. Warren turned away, busying himself with adjusting his scarf. But he caught the flicker of surprise in the girl's eyes, a flicker that felt like gratitude. Though nothing was said aloud. Warren stepped outside into the brittle light, Murphy padding at his heel. The sun had already slipped low, painting the snow a pale lavender, the shadows stretching long and blue across the field. The cold was sharper now, biting at his face and hands, but Warren paid it little mind. He found a patch of dry ground at the edge of the building, ringed by a few old stones, the remnants of a fire pit once used by night watchmen or vagrants. With practiced hands, he gathered dry twigs, a few scraps of old newspaper from his car, and set about coaxing a flame to life. It took time. His fingers, stiff with cold and age, fumbled with the lighter. Murphy watched, lying down in the snow, his body forming a gentle curve against the earth, eyes fixed on Warren as if waiting for a sign. The children watched from the door, huddled together, unsure if they were invited or merely tolerated. When the first flame caught, Warren fed it slowly, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and memory. He gestured, brief and gentle, for the children to join him. They stepped out hesitantly, arms wrapped tight around their thin bodies, the cold seeping through their shoes and sleeves. Murphy rose and walked between them, his back brushing the girl's hand, his warmth drawing them forward. The four of them gathered around the tiny fire. It was nothing grand, a few orange sparks, the soft pop of sap in the wood, but it glowed all the same. Mateo edged closer, hands outstretched. The girl, her name still unspoken, sat cross-legged, letting the warmth seep into her bones. Murphy curled himself around them, a living barrier against the chill, his eyes half closed, content. There was no rush. The sky darkened, and the shadows crept up the wall of the warehouse. But Warren let the silence fill in the gaps. He pulled off his gloves and held his hands to the flames, feeling the ache of old scars loosening just a little in the heat. He did not try to fill the space with conversation. Instead, he listened to the crackle of fire, the small sighs of relief from the children, the soft snuffle of Murphy breathing slow and deep. As the fire grew, Warren took off his hat and set it in Mateo's lap, a simple gesture. The boy blinked at him, confused, then shyly pulled it over his ears. The girl smiled, brief, fragile, but there, and nudged her brother closer to the fire. Warren noticed the way her shoulders eased, the careful guard dropping, if only for a moment. Murphy stretched out, laying his head on the girl's knee. She stroked his fur, fingers tracing the scar where his tail ended, her movements gentle, rhythmic, as if she was telling him a secret in the language only children and animals know. Warren's boots made deep prints in the snow beside the fire pit, marking his presence as firmly as any words could. He stood, hands tucked in his pockets, looking up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to show, dim and shy. The night would be long, and he knew there were no easy answers. Still, in this small ring of warmth, he felt a kind of peace settle over him, the peace of doing what he could, of giving what was his to give. Time, company, a sliver of chocolate, the comfort of a fire, and the unwavering companionship of a good dog. The children did not ask when they would have to go. Warren did not say. Murphy yawned, pressing closer to the girl, his tail thumping in the snow. For the first time, Warren saw the girl lean into the warmth, letting herself be held by the quiet presence beside her. Above them, the night gathered, soft and deep, and the little fire burned on, a small, stubborn light against the dark, bearing witness to the silent, ordinary heroism of simply staying. The last of the daylight faded, pulling a deeper chill over the patch of ground beside the warehouse. Warren stamped out the small fire, stirring the embers into gray, swirling ash with the toe of his boot. The children, arms wrapped tight around their middles, watched him with a quiet trust that had not been there hours before. Murphy lingered close, tail brushing Mateo's ankles, head turned up as if awaiting direction. Warren led the way toward his cruiser, motioning gently. The walk through the snow was unhurried, the children's footsteps tentative but no longer reluctant. Murphy paced at their side, a steadying presence, ears flicking at every sound, the creak of ice-laden branches, the far-off bark of another dog, the distant rattle of a train slipping through the edge of town. In that open space, each breath steamed the air, visible reminders that they were still together, still moving forward. They reached a little house near the woods, squat and narrow, paint peeling from the door, the front yard adrift in snow. Its porch light was dead, but a line of pale smoke drifted from the chimney, promising warmth inside. The girl stepped ahead of Warren, pulling her brother by the hand, and knocked softly on the warped wood. An old woman opened the door, small, stooped, her gray hair gathered in a braid at the nape of her neck. Her eyes, sharp despite their cloudiness, darted between Warren and the children. For a heartbeat, her face hardened with suspicion, But then she caught sight of Murphy's gentle bulk, and something in her gaze softened. Warren nodded a silent greeting, then knelt to rub Murphy's ears. The dog pressed his head into Warren's palm, tail moving slow, content. Inside, the air was close with the scent of coal and cabbage. A battered stove flickered in the corner, heat pulsing in fits and starts. The kitchen table was bare but for a chipped teapot and a single photo in a cracked frame. A younger woman, holding a boy and a girl much smaller than the ones standing beside Warren now. Time and hardship had stretched their faces, but the resemblance was clear. The old woman moved with a careful economy, tending the stove, finding blankets, pouring water into tin cups. She did not scold, did not ask where the children had been, only pressed Mateo's hand and ushered him to the warmth of the fire. The girl stood for a moment on the threshold, shoulders rigid. Warren placed a steadying hand on her back, and only then did she step inside, the door swinging shut on the night behind them. Murphy settled at the hearth, positioning himself so both children could lean against him if they wished. The boy, already shivering, burrowed into a pile of blankets, pressing his cold feet against Murphy's side. The girl perched on a low stool, arms locked across her chest, jaw set as if bracing for a storm that never quite came. Her eyes drifted to the photo on the table, lingering, then away. Warren moved quietly around the small kitchen, gathering kindling from a basket, stacking logs near the stove, then striking a match. The fire flared, catching, sending up the scent of resin and hope. The old woman nodded in approval and busied herself with a tin of cocoa powder, her hands shaking only slightly as she measured and stirred. No one spoke. The only sounds were the tick of the wall clock and the soft, tentative breathing of children half asleep. Warren took 2 mugs, filled them with cocoa, and set them down in front of the siblings. The girl's hand hesitated at the rim before curling around the chipped handle. She brought the mug to her lips, eyes never leaving the dark window, and drank in slow, careful sips. As the warmth seeped into the children, their posture changed. Mateo slouched against Murphy, eyelids drooping, fingers tangled in the dog's thick fur. The girl's shoulders eased, her chin dipping, tension melting in the glow of firelight. Warren sat at the far end of the table, notebook open in his lap, pen poised. He did not write, only watched, breathing in the quiet. A memory floated up, his son, wrapped in a blanket after a fever, sipping cocoa, looking up at Warren with fever-bright eyes and a question he never managed to ask. The ache of it was gentler now, less a wound than a scar, and Warren let himself feel it, allowed it to mingle with the relief of the present. He glanced at the old woman, who sat with her back straight and her hands folded, eyes fixed on the children, as if daring the world to take them away again. On the mantel a candle flickered, stubby and pink, the remnant of a birthday celebration that had been more hope than happiness. Murphy, ever watchful, kept his head up, tail sweeping across the floor, inviting any touch, any affection, with his calm gravity. The girl reached out at last, her fingers stroking Murphy's head, tracing the line where fur gave way to scar. She whispered something too soft to hear, eyes bright and full. Warren felt something shift in the room. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the smallest crack in the armor that grief had built around these hearts. In this kitchen, with a stranger's dog and a borrowed sense of safety, the past felt less like a burden and more like a shared story, one that could be told quietly, without shame. As the clock struck midnight, the house settled into a hush. The children slept. The old woman dozed in her chair, and Warren, still awake, looked up at the photo on the table, a reminder that every life here was shaped by loss. But still, for now, they were warm, together, and remembered. Murphy shifted in his sleep, ears twitching, as if dreaming of running through snowbanks, the laughter of children at his side. Warren closed his eyes, listening to the soft pulse of the stove, the gentle weight of memory settling over him. Not as regret, but as a blessing. Warren didn't sleep much that night. He sat at the small table in his own kitchen, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, the taste of black coffee bitter and grounding on his tongue. The house was silent except for the faint sigh of the furnace and the intermittent thump of Murphy shifting his weight beneath the table. Outside, snow sifted against the windows, gentle, unhurried, blanketing the porch and the car in layers so soft it seemed impossible the world could be cruel. His notebook lay open beside him. The lamplight made the ink look bluer than it was. He stared at the words he'd written before dusk. Today is someone's birthday. I remembered. Maybe a piece of bread and a candle is enough for someone to be remembered. He tapped his pen against the page, thinking of those two children, their faces caught between pride and pleading, how the girl had tried so hard to hold herself together, how Mateo had clung to his sister's hand and to Murphy's fur as though afraid that letting go meant falling forever. Warren wondered how long they'd been carrying that weight. He wondered, too, how many people he'd passed in this town, at the grocery store, the gas station, on his quiet rounds, who carried burdens just as heavy and just as silent. There was a humility in realizing how much went unseen, how much was survived not by will or strength, but simply by staying, being the steady place in the room. He closed the notebook and stood, stretching his aching knees. Murphy lifted his head, eyes tracking Warren's movements, tail thumping in a gentle, expectant rhythm. Warren knelt, running his hands through the thick fur along Murphy's ruff, feeling the slow, sturdy heartbeat beneath his palm. The old dog's body was heavy with sleep, but his gaze was alert, watchful, faithful, the way only a dog can be for someone who once rescued him and now found himself needing rescue too. In the dim light, Murphy's shadow stretched across the floor, elongated and wavering, a silent sentinel. Warren found comfort in that shape, the reliable weight of a friend who would always wait for him to finish his thoughts, who would never ask him to hurry the telling of a story, who would never hurry him out of a feeling. As the clock marked the hours, Warren thought about the way children sometimes learn to make themselves invisible, to not need, not ask, not cry, not draw attention to what's missing. He remembered his own boy, how after his mother died he'd grown so serious, so careful, how laughter had become a rare and precious thing in their home. Warren had tried to be strong, to fill the space with work, with routine, with discipline, thinking it was what was needed. But strength, he realized too late, was sometimes just a hard shell that kept out not only the bad, but all the good too. He leaned back, closing his eyes. He let the night unfold around him, memories seeping in with the warmth of the house, a birthday gone by, a fishing trip planned and canceled by rain, the memory of a kitchen alive with the smell of baking, laughter ringing from room to room, things lost, things never named, things that somehow survived inside him all the same. Murphy huffed, shifting position, one paw twitching in a dream. Warren smiled, reached down, and let his fingers brush the old scar at the end of Murphy's tail. The dog opened one eye, as if in acknowledgement, and for a long moment, man and dog sat together, sharing the quiet, letting time pass without agenda or regret. At last, the world outside began to pale. the first suggestion of dawn bluing the snow along the windowsills. Warren stood and padded quietly through the house, pausing to look at the photo tucked into the corner of his dresser. His boy, maybe 7 or 8, arms wrapped around a golden retriever now long gone, both of them grinning into the sun. He touched the corner of the frame, not with longing, but with gratitude for having known such love, even if only for a short time. He returned to the kitchen, filled Murphy's bowl, and sat once more, notebook in hand. The words came slowly, tentative at first, then gathering certainty as he wrote. Some hearts keep beating by remembering, some by forgetting. Tonight I remembered. Tonight I stayed. Outside, the storm had passed. Murphy stood, stretched, and nosed Warren's hand, ready for whatever the morning would bring. The world felt, for the first time in a long time, not new exactly, but not as lonely. In that moment, with a dog's steady breath at his side, Warren understood that healing did not come with a flourish. It was a long night, a slow warming, the gift of simply remaining, of being a quiet witness to another's life. The yellow lamp burned on as Warren put down his pen, closed his eyes, and let the peace of a hard-won, silent night settle into his bones. A pale sun rose the next morning, slicing through the remnants of storm with blades of cold, golden light. North Hollow was hushed, the snow on rooftops untouched and glimmering, icicles framing the eaves like the edges of lace curtains. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. Warren stood in his living room, pulling on his boots with care, each movement deliberate, unrushed, as though he was learning how to enter the day differently. Murphy circled him once, then waited by the door, head tilted, tail sweeping the worn mat in slow, hopeful arcs. In the kitchen, Warren set a fresh loaf of bread and 2 battered comic books inside a cloth bag. No grand gestures, just small comforts, the sort that last through hungry afternoons and quiet evenings. He glanced at the photograph of his son, then at Murphy, and found something less heavy in the act, a softening in his chest, an acceptance that the present was asking only for patience, not miracles. He trudged through snow, Murphy bounding ahead, their tracks joining in parallel paths toward the edge of the woods. The morning air bit at Warren's cheeks, but the cold was honest. Easier to bear than the cold he used to carry inside. The children's house came into view, smoke curling from the chimney. The frost clung to the windows, turning the glass to milky stone. But inside, Warren could see the glow of firelight, steady, inviting. He paused at the porch, brushing the snow from his shoulders, and knocked softly. The door creaked open, not all the way, and the old woman peered out. Her hair was plaited today, a blue scarf knotted at her throat. She looked at Warren with wary gratitude, as if she'd spent a lifetime waiting for kindness to turn. Warren offered the bread, the comic books. She took them without words, then stepped aside so he and Murphy could enter. The kitchen was warmer than before, the heat of the stove banishing the sharp edge from the air. Mateo sat on the floor, a quilt wrapped around his legs, a wooden train car in his hand, chugging it softly over the faded linoleum. His sister, Warren caught her name at last. Anna sat at the table, hands folded in her lap, hair brushed and shining. She watched the newcomers, eyes cautious but no longer afraid. Murphy padded directly to the children, tail wagging in gentle, slow sweeps. Mateo greeted the dog with an unguarded smile, reaching up to loop his arms around Murphy's neck, burying his face in the warm fur. Anna hesitated, then reached out as well, her hand gentle, tracing the ridge of Murphy's back. For the first time, Warren saw her smile, small, uncertain, but real. The old woman, seeing this, placed a folded cloth on the table, a white handkerchief, hand-stitched in faded blue. "Thank you." The letters neat but uneven, the kind learned long ago and kept for special occasions. She did not press it into Warren's hands, but left it on the wood between them, a token of gratitude that was more powerful for being silent. Warren sat at the edge of the room, not imposing, simply present. He listened to the gentle rhythm of Anna reading aloud, her voice shy at first, then growing stronger as she turned the pages of the comic book for Matteo. Murphy lay stretched across both their feet, sighing in pleasure, letting the children lean against his warm side as they read and played. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane, but inside the kitchen, there was only warmth, the clink of the old woman's cup as she poured tea, Matteo's bright laughter as Murphy nudged his train off the rails, Anna's voice, steady, then giggling, then quiet again. Warren watched the life unfolding in front of him, small, ordinary, and yet full of a tenderness he had thought impossible not so long ago. No declarations, no promises, just the return of small joys, pieced together out of trust and presence. Anna rose, crossing the room, and returned a moment later with a photograph she'd found. Her parents, smiling, arms around her and Matteo when they were both younger and fuller-cheeked. She set the photo on the table, tracing the faces with a finger. The old woman watched with soft eyes, then reached out to cover Anna's hand with her own. Warren caught Murphy's gaze and, in it, saw the same quiet pride that filled his own heart. The dog's job, never to fix, always to stay, was being accomplished in ways only an animal and a person who's lost could understand. Before he left, Warren took out his old Polaroid camera, just one photo left in the cartridge. He asked softly if Anna and Matteo wanted a picture with Murphy. They nodded. He took the shot, Anna kneeling beside the dog, her arm around her brother's shoulders. Matteo grinning with missing teeth. Murphy sitting tall, his eyes bright and content. He waited for the film to develop, then placed it in a small frame he'd brought from home, handing it to Anna. She smiled, a true wide smile, and hugged Murphy tightly around the neck. The old woman touched Warren's sleeve in thanks, then pressed the handkerchief into his palm. He left without ceremony, Murphy at his side, the kitchen filled with the low hum of children's laughter. Snow had begun to fall again, gentle as forgiveness, covering their tracks. Warren tucked the handkerchief into his pocket, feeling the soft weight of gratitude. And as he walked home, he realized that sometimes the smallest returns, bread, a comic, a dog's patience, could thaw the longest winter. Late winter in North Hollow has a peculiar way of fading, not with sudden thaw or riotous color, but in the slow lengthening of afternoons, the reluctant drip of icicles, the pale promise of mud at the edges of the snowbanks. It was in one of those lingering afternoons that Warren and Murphy found themselves at the small-town park, the kind bordered by stunted spruce and battered picnic tables, swings frozen stiff until the sun found them again. Warren sat on a cold bench, hands buried in the pockets of his heavy coat. Murphy lay sprawled beneath the bench, his muzzle resting on his paws, tail flicking every so often, as children's laughter drifted on the breeze. Warren's notebook lay open on his knee, but he didn't write. Not yet. He watched instead. Anna, her dark hair unbraided for the first time, running across the patchy snow with a group of local kids, her cheeks flushed and bright. Matteo trailed behind her, the wooden train car poking from his jacket, face split wide with a toothy grin. No one stared at them now. They'd become just two more children in a world that, for a little while, didn't measure who belonged by the weight of their accent or the thinness of their clothes. The old woman sat nearby, wrapped in her blue scarf, face set with quiet pride. Every so often, she'd catch Warren's eye and offer a soft, slow nod. The kind that needs no explanation. Murphy, after a time, rose from beneath the bench and lumbered into the sunlight, stretching each leg as though testing the earth itself. He watched Anna skip rope, then trotted over, inserting himself into the circle of children, letting their hands pat his head and tug gently at his ears. He rolled onto his back with a happy huff, legs splayed, the old scar where his tail ended exposed without shame. Mateo knelt to scratch Murphy's belly, and the dog's tongue lolled out, eyes half closed in bliss. It was the first time in years, Warren realized, that he'd seen Murphy play so freely, unbothered by noise, unguarded, his bark erupting suddenly as Anna chased him around a snowbank. The sound startled a flock of sparrows from a bush and drew a round of delighted squeals from the children. Murphy barked again, bounding in a crooked, joyful arc. Anna, breathless, wrapped her arms around the dog's thick neck, burying her face in his fur. Warren's heart clenched, not with sadness, but with a gratitude so fierce it left him unsteady. He remembered how, for so long, every small kindness had felt futile, every gesture lost to the vastness of what couldn't be mended. Yet here, in the mild chaos of children and old dogs, something like hope had returned, quiet, unhurried, almost invisible, but there all the same. He opened his notebook and wrote slowly, letting the words emerge as they would. Sometimes all you need is a day that doesn't ask anything special of you. A dog rolling in the snow, a child's laughter, a place to sit and watch it happen. Healing isn't loud. It's just the world not hurting for a while. He paused, watching as the children piled onto the swings, Murphy trotting beneath them, Anna shouting something over her shoulder that Warren couldn't hear but understood all the same. The sky was pale and cloudless, light pooling at the edges of everything, blurring the hard outlines of winter into something softer. Later, as shadows lengthened and the park emptied, Anna and Mateo wandered back to the bench. Mateo's hands were sticky with the remains of a lollipop a friend had shared. Anna tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her steps slower, the old self-consciousness returning for a moment before Murphy nudged her side, and she giggled. The sound quiet, but real. The old woman gathered her things, glancing at Warren as she tied her scarf. He nodded, gathering his own coat and notebook, and together they walked the children home. Murphy ambled at their side, tongue lolling, eyes bright. Every so often, he'd pause to sniff a patch of slush, then hurry ahead to catch up, glancing back as if to make sure no one was left behind. Back at the little house, Anna paused on the step. She bent, arms around Murphy's neck, whispering into his fur. Warren didn't hear the words, but saw the way Murphy leaned into her, patient as ever, eyes closing in trust. Warren waited as the children and their grandmother disappeared inside, the warmth from the open door spilling into the blue dusk. He glanced back toward the park, the tracks of their day already filling with new snow, erasing evidence, as if the world itself wanted to remember only the warmth. He stood for a long time on the sidewalk, Murphy sitting quietly beside him, both of them watching the lights come on, one by one, behind the frosted window. The night was cold, but for the first time in a long while, Warren felt it less. He knelt, one hand buried in the thick fur at Murphy's neck. "Sometimes, old boy," he murmured, not needing an answer, "all it takes is showing up, again and again." Murphy wagged his tail, ears flicking forward, and together they walked into the gentle dark, just a man and his dog, following the same path home, knowing that sometimes the ordinary is the most extraordinary thing of all. Years slip by in North Hollow the way snow slips from a barn roof, sudden only if you aren't watching. Winters come, sometimes cruel, sometimes merciful. Springs are muddy, short, but always bring wild violets in the ditches and the faint, clean scent of earth waking up. Some things change. The corner store closes, a new family moves in, children grow tall and quick, and some things somehow remain. Every February, as habit and hope, Warren and Murphy return to the little house at the edge of the woods. The walk grows slower each year. Murphy's muzzle, once deep black, now salt and pepper. His gait, careful and stiff, still carries the same steady patience. A patience that has seen children learn to laugh again, that has outlasted sorrows Warren no longer feels the need to name. Inside, the house is different but familiar. New curtains, more mugs, extra pairs of boots by the door. Anna and Mateo, no longer small, greet Warren with real embraces. Their faces open, changed by time but never by bitterness. On the table there is always cake, sometimes lopsided, sometimes store-bought, but never lonely. There are always candles, too, though no one minds if they melt down too fast or lean to one side. The birthday table has grown. Neighbors come by with old stories and thermoses of coffee, friends, schoolmates, a teacher or two. Even the gruff owner of the gas station, who once said he didn't care for crowds, comes in for a slice. Laughter lives here now, untidy, unplanned, filling the kitchen to its corners. But there is always space. One chair, never filled, sits at the end of the table, a place for absence, for memory, for whoever cannot make it home. Murphy settles there, paws folded, tail thumping against the old floorboards. No party is complete without him. Children, new and old, know to save him a piece of cake, and Anna always slips him the first bite when she thinks no one is looking. No one hurries through these celebrations. When the eating is done, when the laughter dies down, there is a quiet that falls over the room. Not awkward, not empty, just the shared hush of belonging. Someone will light a candle, place it on the windowsill, and let it burn as long as it wants. The old woman, her hair silver now, hands still strong, sits back in her chair and closes her eyes, listening to the soft chorus of voices, content with enough. Warren stands sometimes in the kitchen doorway, hands deep in his pockets, letting the warmth and the voices wash over him. He watches Anna, now tall and gentle, gathering plates, laughing at something Mateo says. He watches Murphy, older but still watchful, tail tapping slow and steady, eyes half closed in peace. He thinks about all the years he tried to be strong by holding everything in, and how it was this, showing up, being present, being patient, that made all the difference. He remembers other winters, hard, brittle, marked by loss, and finds that somehow the sharpness has dulled. The pain is part of the story, yes, but not the whole of it. The greater part is this: the staying, the returning, the ordinary persistence of kindness. Each year he brings something simple, a loaf of bread, a jar of honey, sometimes just the old Polaroid picture now faded with fingerprints and time. Each year the gift is less about what is given, more about what is shared. Outside, snow falls and covers the yard, blanketing the garden in silence. Murphy finds a sunny patch by the window and naps, one ear always turned to the voices behind him. Children pause to pet him as they pass, and he lifts his head, tail thumping, never asking for more than this: to be included, to be remembered, to remain. One year, when Murphy is very old, Warren kneels beside him as the last candle burns low. He buries his face in Murphy's neck, whispering thanks for every winter survived, every small joy witnessed. Anna sits with them, grown now, hand resting on Warren's shoulder. The old handkerchief, still embroidered "Thank you," tucked in her pocket. When the last guests have gone and the dishes are done, Warren lingers at the door, looking back at the table, at the candle flickering in the window, at Murphy curled up on the rug. The air is filled with gratitude, unspoken, unhurried, as real as the scent of wood smoke and cake. He steps into the night, the snow crisp underfoot, the stars sharp above the trees. He knows that some stories do not end. They settle quietly into the lives they've touched, becoming part of the strength that lets people carry on. He knows, too, that the greatest gifts are not loud or dazzling. They are gentle, steady presences. An old dog, a birthday remembered, a place always held at the table. And so, each year, Warren and Murphy return. Not out of obligation, but out of love for what was broken and has been, patiently, made whole again. No promises spoken, no future guaranteed. Only this, the strength of quiet things, and the knowledge that, by staying, by bearing witness, by loving gently and long, they have given more than words ever could. Some nights, the candle in the window burns until dawn, a beacon for anyone lost or lonely in the dark, a reminder that, even in the quietest places, warmth endures. Some stories don't end with fireworks or fanfare. They finish as softly as snowfall, leaving behind only warmth and the memory of gentle hands, loyal paws, and voices that dared to break the silence. In North Hollow, it wasn't a single grand gesture that mended what was broken, but the slow, persistent return of kindness. Year after year, birthday after birthday, one small act at a time. If this story reached a quiet place in your heart, I invite you to share what moment lingered with you most. Sometimes, the truest healing begins not in speaking, but in being heard. Leave a thought below, or simply let the silence be enough. A reminder that presence, patience, and tenderness can heal what noise and hurry never could. Thank you for being part of this circle, where every story, like every winter, carries the hope of spring.